You are listening to the One Day at a Time Recovery Podcast. On this podcast, my guests share their stories of alcoholism, addiction, and how they recovered so that you can too. My hope is that you find the inspiration and resources you need to let go of what's holding you back so that you can transform into the person you were always meant to be. Ready? Here we go. Hi, friend. Thank you for downloading the episode. My name is Arlena, and I'll be your host. This is a little bonus episode. I'll be experimenting with some different formats, so if you find this valuable, please let me know, and I'll do more of them. And that is Teddy snoring in the background. This is actually a very important topic about relationships. If you're in the process of getting sober, you're probably also in the process of repairing relationships. Today, I'm having a chat with Paul, who answered my call for volunteers who are dealing with challenges in sobriety. We're going to be discussing his marriage of 37 years and the struggle he faces in coping with resentment from his wife. I just want to say thank you to Paul for your openness, your vulnerability, and your desire to be of service to others. So without further delay, please enjoy this episode and let me know what you think.
Sure.
So we're gonna talk about making amends. I heard your wife. I got your email. Your wife was like, "Yeah, that sounds great."
Well, she was. She's like, "Oh, I'm glad somebody gets it or understands." Right?
Yeah, definitely. I
It's
mean,
fun. Yeah.
and how long have you been sober?
I'll be a year in 14 days.
Oh my
I know.
gosh.
August. What? August 12th, right?
August
Yeah.
12th this year. Okay.
Yeah. I'm coming up on a year, and it's weird. I've had a little anxiety, but um, I don't.
It's a big milestone.
It
I
is,
mean,
right?
it's huge. Yeah. When I got my 1 year and, I went to a meeting and you go up front where there's a podium and you get a
I
chip and
know.
you get to say something, something. And I was like, oh, it was like more
Yeah.
emotional than graduating high school.
I know. That's how I am. And like when you tell people they're like a year, well, hold on, you haven't had a drink, nothing. No, a year. I'm like, yeah, it's been a year. It's changed my whole life, Dow.
Yeah, I can
Um,
imagine.
and
That's
my whole
amazing.
family. My daughter shared the other day. We went to the gym on the way home. I'm like, I just can't believe it's a year. Like my whole life's changed. And she goes, Dad, you've changed all our lives, everybody around us. And to hear that,
Yeah.
oh, it's incredible.
Wow. That's huge.
This is the
And
way to
listen,
go.
yeah, and it sounds like you've had a lot of you've done a lot of self-examination and you've done a lot of work and you've been through the steps and all that stuff.
Oh,
And but when you and I were talking about doing some coaching stuff, what came up was some issues that are sort of like residual stuff around your relationship with your wife. Do you want to tell me a little bit about how that came up?
Um, it was the making the amends part, and like jokingly, she's not. I mean, not. She always says, "Well, you never really apologized to me, right?" And I'm like, "What do you mean by it?" And I said, "Sure." And basically, what I was saying, I said, "Well, my behaviors have changed, right? I don't act the same way I do, right? I'm a different person." And she said, "That's great, and that's awesome, and that's exactly what we want." But I just feel like you've never really apologized. And I said, like, for what? Had I hurt you, right? And she said, well, you haven't been present in like years, right? Just she's like felt like she was a woman
Yeah.
because I did me, right? Which I hung out in my shed, garage, and just self isolated. And then she gave me, and I said, well, like, give me an example. And one night I was on the phone late talking to a friend, intoxicated, and basically it said some things that pretty bad that cut her deep that she brought up the other day. And I'm like, you're not over that? She's like, no. How would you feel, right? Yeah, well, I was on the phone and I was talking to a friend, and I mean, basically, their sex life had really just dissolved, right? And it was mainly me, right? Because I wasn't attracted to myself, let alone my wife, right?
Mhm.
And I stayed in the other room because I would stay up all night drinking. And I basically had said to my friend on the phone that she's disgusting. I wouldn't go near her. And like, I don't even remember saying that. And that was,
And
so she heard,
that's what she overheard.
oh, she came downstairs at 4 o'clock in the morning and said, "Who are you on the phone with?" And is that a female? And wait, that's what you think of me? And it was pretty bad.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
So she was really hurt by that. And
oh God.
when you guys were talking, when
Yeah.
she mentioned that you hadn't made amends to her and you asked her for specifics, that was the situation that she brought up.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm like, "You're still hanging on to that?" She's like, "Yeah, shouldn't I?" I'm like, "Well, because since then we intimacy's gotten better, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I could right. I mean, we're going to be married 37 years.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, since high school we've been together,
Wow,
and
since high school.
yeah. And the
Yeah.
craziest thing was like I didn't. I used to. It was weird. I used to see right through the woman, right, and
Yeah.
not. Now I step back and see what a beautiful woman she is, and she is a
Yeah.
beautiful lady. And
Yeah.
well, I mean, I'm going to be 57. We've been together since we were 18 years old.
Wow, that's a long
A
time.
long time. Oh yeah.
So, what kind of came up for me when you were sharing
Hmm.
this was, we talk about amends, like what is an amends,
Yep.
which is, that we're talking about the nine step and making amends with somebody is,
Sure.
it's not just an apology. Like, I think that the apology part is important, but
Hmm.
it's interesting how over time, like things that are unresolved will continue to arise. And as they do, the question then becomes, how do you deal with it? Right? Like
Sure.
what can we say to the people that we love so that they feel seen, heard, and understood? Right. And I don't
Yeah.
think it's
Yeah.
unusual. I don't your response of like, you're not over that yet. I already said I was sorry. Like I don't think that's
Yeah.
unusual.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
But I
you
mean,
didn't know she was
yeah,
holding on to that. Is that
oh
fair?
God. Yeah, that's completely fair. Um, and then I used to disregard her a lot. Like in the beginning, we went to I did intensive therapy, and
Oh,
then we
good.
started doing counseling, right, with my drug and alcohol therapist. And like she'd come in and I just couldn't even deal with her, right? Because I was still getting well, and then she would bring up, well, look at all the hurt that you've done. I'm like, can we do this in another session? Like, this is too much. And I don't know that I ever gave her the due diligence, right? In a
Yeah.
session, like, well, this is what you've done, the damage. Um, and you know what? I didn't even have her on my resentment worksheet. And she was like, I should be number one, right? I'm like, you're not even on there.
So you didn't feel resentful towards her.
Yeah, I don't know, but like, I guess the whole amends, right? I didn't list her on there where sponsorship isn't your wife on there? Like, haven't you wronged her? Or and I'm like, yeah, pretty much. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just like, yeah, I just took it for granted that because I'm
Yeah.
healing well in our situation that's
Mhm.
enough.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is interesting because I think this happens to a
Mhm.
lot of people where, you get sober, you change your life, things get better, but
Yeah,
they're not done. Like if she doesn't have a program, she's not doing Al-Anon or anything like that.
she does. She has a therapist that my therapist recommended. Thank God,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
well, or I'm telling you, because she's a type that she keeps everything to the chest, and
Yeah.
people say, "What's wrong with you?" And she would never tell her business, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Ever. And she finally found somebody that she really she could gel with, right?
That's good.
And it's made her feel because she blamed herself for what I was going through.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like I'm like,
that's
what do you have to do with it? But she that's how she felt. Like, well, what did she do wrong? And she like, I know she put on weight. She hated herself and couldn't look in the mirror. And now she lost 45 pounds. She looks great, and she's bounced back from it. So the therapy has helped her immensely.
yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah. But where I was kind of leading you was that if she doesn't have if she is not going through the 12-step process through
Yeah,
Al-Anon, what I love about the 4-step is that this is where you get to sort out all your baggage, right? Like where you get to list all the people that you're resentful at, get really
sure,
specific about the cause and then how it affects you. And then the final piece of that is, what is my role in all this? What is my part?
sure.
Right. And if she doesn't have an opportunity to go through that practice of saying, that was that time that he was on the phone and he said all those horrible things about me, or that time that he spent all night in the garage doing God knows what. And I just, Christmas Eve, I was lonely because he was, do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
she didn't, hasn't had the opportunity to go through that exercise. So what's happening is that occasionally something will arise in her that it's like, hey, remember that time I heard you say something, right? But it's sort of
mhm,
catching you off guard. And if your response is, you're not over that yet, what that does is that it invalidates her feelings and reaffirms the belief that she shouldn't be sharing her feelings. Like you were saying, that she keeps everything
sure.
close to the chest. She
Yeah,
doesn't, do you know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
this sort of reaffirms that her being private, keeping it all
sure.
in, is what she should be doing because she doesn't
Yeah.
really have another way to do it.
So wait,
So,
so that's a good point. So I mean, is that something they do in Al-Anon?
yeah,
Because I,
they do the 4 steps too.
oh,
It's
because
the 12 steps.
so because I've recommended, and she's pretty close to going because I go to a meeting on Sunday night that this couple started, and the wife has Al-Anon in the other room, and
Oh,
they have,
nice.
yeah, and it's funny. Not this, well, it is kind of funny because they're laughing the whole time, and we're serious as heart attacks. It's funny. I told her, I said, "You're missing out. You should go." It sounds like they're having a blast. I said, "They're laughing at us, the weirdos."
They're probably laughing at themselves.
Yeah, right. But you
Yeah.
know what? That's a good point because I don't know that she shares everything that she does with her therapist that she does with me, right?
Yeah. Well, therapy is a little bit different. I mean, what I really liked
Mhm.
about the 4-step is that it's such a pragmatic, practical process for
Yeah.
sorting through it all.
Hmm.
Right. Because a lot of times it's like, I don't know if you've ever had that argument with your wife where you're like, you bring up one thing and then she brings up something else and then
Oh,
it dovetails and pretty soon there's like 10 things on the table. Nobody knows what we're talking about anymore.
constantly.
Right.
That was
So
always our arguments, always, and
very
nothing got resolved.
circular, nothing
Yeah,
got gets resolved. Yeah, it's just crazy making.
nothing. Yeah, and then I was always right, and she was always right. Never any common ground.
Exactly. So the
Mhm.
process of so my husband and I have been together for a long time. We got married in
Yeah.
97, so it's been a minute. But we got together when we were both sober using the program, and I have often credited the process of the 4-step for our marriage because
Oh,
it's sort of it's the resentment is a wedge that gets between us, right? And over a long period of time, that wedge just gets bigger and bigger. But the 4-step was always a way for us to resolve our resentments. And I would go to my sponsor and I'd be like, Bobby did this and Bobby did that. And
oh
she'd look
yeah,
at me and she goes, okay, well, I don't sponsor him. So we're going to look at your part. And be like,
sure.
what a
That's
bitch.
funny.
But meanwhile, he's doing the same thing. He goes to his sponsor, to the guys, whatever, and they do
Mhm.
their thing. But the end result is I would leave my sponsor having empathy for how my behavior affected him. And we would get really specific. I'd be like, oh, I would see how my fear of spending money made me really controlling, and I behaved in ways that embarrassed you or made you feel bad. I was the cause. It was my fear that was out of
Sure,
control that caused, fights around money, let's say.
sure.
And meanwhile, he'd been doing his process with the guys, and he'd come to me ready to own his stuff, being like, I could see how my spending, was self-centered or thoughtless or whatever he said. And I feel really bad for causing fear in you or making you feel financially insecure or whatever. But
Sure.
we're both coming together ready to own our own part, and it really dissolved. Like there was no fight, right? There's no defense. If there's no defense, there's no fight, right? You're not defending.
Yeah, sure.
You're just there to own your stuff. But since she's not doing that process, I would imagine it would be helpful for you that as stuff comes up for her, because it's
Mhm.
great that she's in therapy. My suspicion is that as she's processing her feelings and she feels safe, she's building safety with this therapist, that stuff will begin to arise that she forgot about. And she needs to be able to bring that to you in a way where she feels like you can hear her and validate her feelings,
Sure. And I could
right?
never do that before because I just never wanted to deal with it. And I would try to change the subject and get over it and move on, right? Never. I was too uncomfortable.
Well, there it
Never.
is.
I would never want to
It's
deal with it. And
painful.
I would never hear it out. Sure. And then I don't know. She's so perfect though. Love her to death. But like I'm like, it's must be tough being perfect because she, maybe she
I
is, but
mean, I would imagine
she,
she's wired pretty tight.
well, yeah, but I mean, like, it was always everything that I've ever done. Right? Like, do you have any part? And I don't know that she does to this day. So I'm thinking what you're saying is huge, right? Because we've never been able to communicate without yelling at each other. That serious.
Well, the reason people yell is because
Yeah,
they don't feel like they're being heard,
yeah,
right?
sure.
And so we yell. Really the antidote to that
Yeah,
is changing the way we listen.
you're right.
So my suggestion would be as she brings things up, if you start to feel, where do you feel it in your body? Like, can you visualize like that conversation? She's like, well, you never made amends to me. You said all that stuff. And you're like, you're
I
still, where do you feel it in your body?
in my chest and I get so aggravated and then I usually what is it? It's fight or flight, and I'm the flight guy, like where I would just that I would run and leave and then go get drunk and wreck my
Okay.
car, and that's the stuff what I would do because I
Yeah.
hated dealing with it. I could feel coming on, and then she would yell, and then I'm like, I'm out of here, and then it would continue for days, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
So the feeling in your chest,
Mm-hmm.
that is your signal. That is your signal of I'm afraid.
Oh,
Like
really?
this is something I want to avoid, right? It's too painful. So when you get that feeling, that is your signal to say to her, wow, I'm really having an emotional response to this. Let me process what you said and get back to you, right?
She would probably fall over dead. Right? But no, but I'm a different person now, so she may not, right? I'm a lot more calmer and
Listen, you
I'm
could give her a heads up,
yeah.
right? You
No,
give
you're
her a
right.
heads up, go, you know what? I'm going to try something different.
Yeah,
The next time you feel like you want to share something with me, I
yeah,
might you might notice that I'm trying to feel it, like, am I getting that feeling in my chest? And I might ask you to give me a moment to process this information and just
sure.
be like, look, I love you. I want you to feel validated. I might need a minute to work through this so that I can
Mhm.
respond in a rational way. So, like, give her a heads up it's coming. Do
Yeah,
you know what I
no, I
mean?
like that. Yeah, that's huge. That's the start of communication there, right?
Yeah, just let her, hey, I
Right?
had this
Yeah.
conversation. I have a new strategy I want to try out. I might not be perfect
Right.
at it at first, but this is what I'm thinking. This is what I want to try. You just run the experiment, as they say in the program, right? You
Okay.
just,
Yeah.
so you have new information. You go, I'm gonna, if you want to share something with me after therapy or whatever, I'm open to hearing it, but just know that if I start to get that feeling like I want to run, I'm going to
Yeah,
hear you out. And then I'm going to ask you if it's okay if I can respond when I've had a chance to process it.
sure.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of setting the table, so to
Yeah,
speak.
that's huge. And I think where I'm at in my growth, that's something I can definitely do.
And then the second piece of that is the processing, right?
Hmm.
And it's really being able to validate her feelings. Like an amends is like, I want to try to validate your feelings here. I want to hear what you have to say. And the magic words that, like, I don't know if this is all women or people, to validate somebody's feelings is to say, I could see how you'd feel that way. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you think I need to try to understand? Like these are some of the phrases you can use so that she can get it all out. And you don't necessarily need to do anything because you've already done the thing, right? You're
Sure.
making a living amends to her. But
Yep.
really, what this does is you're validating her feelings. And sometimes we just need to know what the words are.
And you hit it right on the head because looking back, I've never validated because I never wanted to deal with it, right? Because it was painful, aggravating, and look, I'm dealing with my own crap here, but no,
Yeah,
that's huge. That's huge.
I'm sure you already feel like shit about it, to be
Oh,
perfectly honest.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, when she brings it up, does it almost feel like you're reliving it or re-experiencing the guilt and
That's the
shame?
problem. And or it's I can't believe you said that because I feel like it's taking steps backwards, and I'm like,
Yeah.
we're just starting from why are we? I thought we moved on. She'd say, no, you moved on, but I have not moved on. I'm like,
Yeah.
that was like 2 years ago, right? 3 years
Yeah,
ago,
but
and
she buried it.
I know, and I'm like, I'm clearly not that person. And when I had said that, I was clearly intoxicated. But she said it was said, and I said,
Yeah.
"You're right. You're right."
Yeah. Yeah.
See, men, we could just brush it under, but we brush it, and it boils and comes to the surface, right? Because we
It
don't deal.
does. There's this saying that time heals all wounds, and I feel like
Yeah,
that is just like the biggest lie. It doesn't.
agree.
The pain waits. The
It
pain
does.
waits until we are strong enough to face it. And maybe
Sure,
now she has moments where she feels strong enough to try to be honest.
sure.
And she's trying to get her needs met, which is she's asking you to validate her feelings. And really
Yeah,
validating is like, it's true. The feeling that
yeah,
you had was,
sure.
yeah, that was valid.
Yeah,
Of
that's
course she
huge.
felt hurt. Yeah.
But that time heals all. I agree with you. That's crap because I'm an example. I'll tell you why, right? I
Why?
lost my twin brother 8 years ago to drugs and alcohol, right?
Oh,
Never dealt with it. Well, I mean, like he struggled forever, and I like knew the day was going to come,
yeah.
and say, "Oh, I'll be prepared for it." And he passed away, and I guess a year went by, and I'm generally a happy guy. Just was completely depressed, right? Didn't know what it was. I mean,
Really?
everyone knew, but me, right? And this was like 7 years later, and still didn't know what was going on. That's when I started drinking excessively, and
Mm,
I didn't care about anything. It was the worst, and that kind of put me in my tailspin. And then
yeah.
when I finally did therapy, my mother died when I was 15, right? So the therapist said, "You've been running away from yourself, right? Time is not healing those wounds. You have to talk about this stuff, right?" And I never
Mm,
talked about it because it was uncomfortable. If my brother's name came up, I would cry, and I just hated that feeling. And that was a perfect example, right? eight
yeah.
years later, nothing healed. I got worse. And like now, I couldn't even have this conversation with you about my brother a year ago. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. But now, because everyone would say to me, like, um, it wasn't your fault. What could you didn't do it? It's easier said than done, right? They were
Yeah.
his choices, right?
Yeah.
I said I get all that, but we hadn't talked for about a year or two because he was in and out of jail, and he was trying to get to me and then sober living, and he was doing well, which I mean, I didn't believe it because, I guess a month later he died from a heroin overdose. So how well was he doing? But
Yeah.
that haunted me for so long that I never had that closure.
That's haunting.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And then the alcohol consumption, that just buried it.
Yeah.
Then I went to therapists, I seen a priest and grief counselors, and I would go to the session and then go right to the bar because it was too much.
That's a lot. Yeah.
It was, but now where I'm at in my life, I can honor him, and it's I'm so grateful that I can, because
Yeah.
that when Thurston would say, like he wouldn't want this for you,
No.
and but what was crazy, and I tell everybody that, like, I always thought this disease was a choice, and I used to get mad at him, and I'm like, here, I'm living this now, like,
Yeah.
right? What the heck is going on? I'm in the same position he was. And I know he went through the program, did the 12 steps, and like he's like a holy roller. And I didn't know anything about AA for the longest time. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I was approached to go to AA, I was against it, right? I said, "What? It didn't do anything for my brother, right?
Oh, yeah.
He,
Good
he,
point.
he didn't. What did AA do for him?" And I share that too. With I share that with my sponsor, and I said, "I'm not really an AA guy." And he goes, "Well, how do you know?" And I go, "Well, it didn't work for my twin, and but it
Yeah.
does work for me." And
I've heard that. I've heard that from children of alcoholics is that, they don't want to go to A because they saw their parents do it and their parents didn't get sober. So they don't think that it works or it'll apply to them or there's resentment towards the program. So
yeah,
that's not uncommon. But it sounds like you had some trauma at 15 when your mother died. And then your brother dying also probably exacerbated. I mean, that's a
uh,
lot of unprocessed grief.
tons. Yeah, I never done, and I come from like a big family, and one of 10, and we never even talked about it. Like, we never talked about my mother's death or my brother, and it was strange. And I have a
Yeah.
brother that's only not we're 19 months apart from my twins. We're really close, and we just would never talk about it. And we shared the same birthday, and that was, oh, I used to dread my birthday. Like,
Yeah.
I felt like I wasn't allowed to celebrate it. And then
Wow.
my drinking would, like, for a week or two before, like, they would be on pins and needles, my family, like,
Yeah.
what's going to happen. And I would be in bed like the whole next day, drunk. And it was horrible.
Yeah. I
But
mean, I've
I didn't
often
know how to
thought,
process it.
I mean, it's too big.
Yeah.
It's too big.
Well, that
But,
twin bond is like,
and
everybody's,
nobody understands.
they don't, right? And
Yeah.
they would try to understand, and poor
There's no understanding that.
no.
I'm not a twin. I have no idea what that's like.
Yeah.
I know grief, but I don't know that
Yeah.
grief.
It's been a long road, and 7 years now that I'm grateful I can talk about it, process it
Yeah.
without crying.
I mean, there's no shame in crying, right? That's
But I always thought there was. I did, as a man. Like, you
yeah,
don't do that. Like, you're the
yeah,
tough guy, you're the rock. And my kids would scream and just, why don't you cry? And I'm like, I can't let them see me like that. And
right. Yeah.
yeah,
The irony is when our children see us sad or depressed or whatever, and then they see us come out of it, that is evidence that they too can survive things like that.
you're
Right.
right.
Like
I'm
sometimes
sure
we fight in front of the kids, but we make up in private, and the kids never understand how that gets resolved.
that's true.
Yeah. So us being able and willing to feel our feelings is really the thing that teaches. We teach by example. Like they're always, everyone's watching. Like everybody close
I
to you is watching.
You're right, huh? But
Yeah.
you don't, at times you don't realize that, right?
No, why would you know
Right. I know. I mean, I always knew I
that?
was like a role model, and then I got to the point where I was justifying my drinking. Like, I'm done being a role model. Like, why do I have to be the role model all the time? Do right? Like, I wanted, was that the self pity going on?
I mean,
It's
listen,
so
it's
sad,
a heavy burden,
right?
right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm back to being that role model. Thank God. I
Yeah.
know.
Well, we're always an example. It's either what's that saying? We're either a cautionary tale or an example, something like
Yeah,
that. But
it's true, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, but it sounds like you did a lot of work to process your feelings instead of avoid them, right? Like I always feel like
Yeah, a
the
lot.
purpose of addiction is distraction, and we're trying to, it's avoidance of pain. And we typically avoid our pain because if we don't have the coping skills to let our feelings process to resolution, then it feels like it's going to go on forever. Like the grief will go on forever. The guilt over people's hurt will go on forever. And
No doubt.
that's yeah, it's
I
just simply
was a
not
prime
true.
example of it. I was.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you feel like you have some good phrases and a good strategy for being able to validate your wife's feelings as things come up for her?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you've given me some tools and I'm planning on using them. And I
Good,
think it's
good.
the initial communication that I hear you, I understand what you're saying, right? I never
Yeah.
did that before, right?
Yeah.
And the validation I think is huge, and hopefully she don't fall to the floor.
Well, what if
But
she does, right?
well, I know,
Let
but I
her.
don't think, yeah, because she's saying how much of a different person I am these days. So
Yeah.
she is. I got really spiritual, and I really do. I like it's weird. I go to Bob. I shouldn't say it's weird, but the person I wasn't what I am now. Because
Yeah.
I go to Bible study, and my kids call me this Bible thumper, and my wife goes, "Look, would you rather
This
have
is
the Bible?"
better.
Yeah, that's funny. That's what she says. This is better, but it
Yeah.
really has. I mean, and just the whole process, the fellowship and the spiritual awakening that I had, which for me was the God of your understanding, right? To me, because I love Joe and Charlie, right? Like we have a meeting for
The Joe
that.
and Charlie tapes.
Are they
Yeah.
the best? Like because that book's intimidating, right?
Yeah.
And I have ADHD and I don't. Oh wait, hold on. This is funny. Here's my book.
Oh, there it is.
Wait up. I got it. I got a Yeti sticker on it.
Heaven
But
forbid.
yeah, and a giant. Look, this is the giant
A large
font.
print. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's hard for me to retain stuff growing up, right? So like when I seen that book and I start my sponsor, read the doctor's, I'm like, there's no way I'm getting through this, dude. I'm telling you, right? And then so the Joe and Charlie, it's unbelievable. And what I was able to relate to is the spiritual awakening was a
Mhm.
result in a behavior change to be able to recover from alcohol by casting away old ideas and accepting new ideas. So I'm like, oh, I have my spiritual awakening because I don't think the way I used to think,
Yeah.
right? So that brought me closer to the whole God thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
so this whole program is just amazing. And
I know.
it was funny, real quick. And so I took my nephew fishing yesterday, right? And he's 11, right? So he's in the church. He goes to Catholic school. So we're going fishing, right? And he's telling me about this kid he's in a fight with, right? And this kid, he wronged me, this, that, and I go, it sounds like you need a resentment worksheet. That is little, right? And he goes, "What's that?" I swear, and I go, "Well,
Yeah.
Anthony, there's a part that you've made played in this, and not at all. He's mean to me, this, and that." And so we started talking about the resentment worksheets fishing, right? I
Yeah.
swear to God. And on the ride home, he's like, Uncle Paul, he says, you know what? You may be right. There's some things and that I may have done to cause this problem with his best friend that they haven't talked in a year. And
A
my sister-in-law
year.
got, oh yeah, like his best friend. It's and then he's like, because I used to be like a tough guy, right? Where, hey, Uncle Paul, should I go like kick his butt? And I'm like, no. And he's like, what? I go, well, why would you want to stoop to that level? Right. And he goes,
Yeah.
you really have changed. Oh,
He was
yeah.
all ready for you to give him some
Yeah.
grappling moves.
So, yeah. Right. So I said, look, that's what people want you to go to that level. I said, look, you can only control what you can do. And if, it may not be all just him. So he goes, well, I want to see the resentment worksheet.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
what's so interesting is like we just weren't raised with those kinds of coping skills.
Mm-mm.
we weren't raised with a critical thinking process where we could like
Yeah,
actually work it through to sort of break that denial and see that we play a part in it.
I never thought that, right? It's easy to go to the victim mentality,
Yeah, that was my
right? And
favorite place to be.
it is, and it's so hard for me, difficult now that like my daughter is really deep in it, and everything is she's the victim, and it just eats me alive.
Yeah.
And because I want her to get out of this mindset, right? She's 29 years old and she's been in a difficult relationship. And I told her, you got to change your thinking, right? And, and I try to instill some of the stuff I learned. And it's just frustrating because she's not grabbing it, right? And
Yeah.
affirmations I send, we talk, and you don't get it, Dad. You don't understand. I'm like, oh, I get it. But
It
that's it.
sounds like there's another opportunity to practice validating feelings. People cannot get to the solution until their feelings are validated. Like they can't get off the problem until they're feeling like they get it that. And
Yeah.
so I would suggest using the same language with your daughter when she's presenting a problem. It's like, oh, well, that sounds really hard. Tell me more about that. And then I could see how you'd feel that way. And then it's, what do you want to do about it?
Yeah. And
Are
you're
you
right,
gonna,
because you're right, Arlene.
yeah, like, are you gonna keep showing up for that?
Yeah, because I'll watch the interaction between my wife and her, and then my wife will well, don't listen. Will tell her what her problem is, right? Like you got to get rid of that guy. He's this, he's that. That's the problem, or this. And she's like, "Can I talk to? Can I like? Because I'm feeling." Like the other day, she's like, Dad, I'm really feeling down," and
Yeah.
and we talk, right? And I'll hear her out, or my wife will get stressed and be like, "I can't believe this," and you need to call that guy. I'm like, I'm not calling anybody. Them days are over. I'm not calling a
Mm-mm.
29-year-old grown man, right? About how he needs to interact with my daughter. Like the guy
Well,
should,
so the thing is, what's jumping out at me is
Mhm.
that if someone comes to me, a girlfriend comes to me and she tells me about how shitty her boyfriend's being, if I criticize him, do you know what that does to her? It puts her in a position where she has to defend him.
You hit it. That's it's been the same MO for 7 years with her and my wife. That,
Yeah.
yes,
And so when we do that, then she's giving your wife all the reasons why she should stay when it should be just the opposite. It's like, you know what? You need to go back and work it out with him. You need to own your part. And she's going to be like, no, then she's going to list all the reasons why she should leave. So
exactly.
it's a little bit of spiritual jujitsu
Yeah.
where
Oh,
you know what I mean? Yeah.
yeah.
Where it's like, oh, we'll lean into that. Like,
Sure.
but the funny thing, listen, I know you know this, but the victim mentality is about holding other people responsible for our feelings when really we're the ones who are responsible. And every time, that's what the four step is good for. Like your daughter could use it too. It's like,
Oh, huge.
what is your part in it? It's like, well, we keep showing up, for that's our part is and this pride thing of like we think that as soon as we think that we know how somebody else should act, and if they would just act this way then I would be happy, which means they're in control of your happiness, which basically means you're the puppet.
Absolutely.
Nobody likes that.
No, no. But yeah, I mean, these steps I tell everybody, I said, you don't even have to be an alcoholic to,
Mm-mm.
and these they're life changing.
Yeah.
They've changed my life, and I'll be 57 this year. I just can't believe it. I can't. I
Yeah.
mean, it took probably 9 or 10 months, but in the beginning, like I didn't understand what they had to do with recovery, right? I
I
really
know.
I didn't, right?
Me
Um,
either. Yeah.
you either. And then I
Yeah.
look back and I thought step one was the hardest thing to do to admit that. But when I look back and I sure that was the easiest thing to do,
Mm-mm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but it's been absolutely life changing for me. And my sponsor, what he says all the time, he goes, how well do you want to get? I go, what do you mean? He goes, you can two-step all you want, right? And I go, what's
Right.
two-step? And he goes, well, you'll learn. He goes, but how well do you want to get? And I go, well, I want to get as well as possible. He said, well, then you're going to put the work in. And we did, right?
Hmm.
And I'm
How
as
free do you
fine.
want to be?
Well, right. That's what
Yeah.
I say, the freedom. And then the
Yeah.
weirdest thing is like, it's like, I'm not finished with that step, right? Because like, well, I'll be driving, something will pop up, right? And I'll
Hmm.
call him and like we'll talk about it on the phone, right?
Hmm.
About it, a situation, and I'll do like a resentment worksheet over the phone.
A little
And
10 step, little
yeah,
spot check inventory. Yeah.
and we talk about it, right? And it's like,
Hmm.
and then he'll tell me that look, that bill's been paid. So, and
Mm.
believe it or not, it like vanishes. It's a
Yeah.
miracle. For me, it was like
Yeah.
stuff. I'm 56 when I was younger, right?
Right.
That's this. It's incredible. That's it. We're going to implement the steps all everybody
I know.
to be a better world. Don't you think?
I
Is
really do. Yeah.
I
Um,
do.
I
Hmm.
know. I know that the whole process is pretty transformative. I actually just finished writing a book called The 12-Step Guide for Skeptics.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just sending it to the copy editor this week, but
Really
yeah, and I'm really just trying to sort of remove the
awesome.
barriers to entry and the things like powerlessness or the God concept or
Yeah.
turning your will and your life over, or what you mentioned earlier about, AA didn't work for my family members, so it's probably not going to work for me, or there's some resentment there. Those are all barriers to entry. But I think, like your experience, it's of like, it's not what I thought it was going to be,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. Um,
So
and I
don't knock
just
it till you try it.
yeah. And then I don't know, I shared that I like before COVID, I had tried gotten sober before for 90 days, right? And I went to a therapist, which he recommended AA, and I was kind of there for grief, but I was avoiding
Mm.
my problem with alcohol. And he said, "You think you could stay sober for 90 days? 1% of people could do it." And I said, "Absolutely." I said, "Look, I could do anything." So he tempted the AA, right? And then COVID came. So I did Zoom, and I couldn't identify, right? Like I'd get on and I couldn't
Mm.
say that, "Hi, I'm Plum, an alcoholic." I would get on and
Right.
say, and I had a sponsor, right? I'm Paul. And I would just, look at everybody like they're so screwed up. I'm not that bad. After I totaled my car, right? And and I'm like,
That was
why
just
is
a
this?
fluke.
Yeah. And this guy would talk about like how he was, close to suicide every week. And I'm like, why does this dude talk about this every week? This is
Yeah.
depressing, right? So I
Yeah.
couldn't identify, but now I understand why. And then day 91, I went and celebrated. And that's when the cycle went
With a
for,
drink.
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, how about,
Celebrate.
and I call my buddy and he's like, no, don't. He was sober at the time. I'm like, well, because I asked the therapist, I said, what's next? And he's like, well, now you go for 6 months. And I'm like, and I had no tools. No, I'm like,
Uh,
now I just showed you to myself I could do 90, right?
yeah,
And then I went back out for up until for 3 years till a year ago.
that's
And
amazing.
when they say you where you leave off is where you start, let me tell you,
They
it's
are
the
not
truth.
lying. Yeah, that's
But
amazing.
um,
Well,
and th-
listen, I would love to hear, like maybe we can check back and you can
sure,
tell me what your experiences are, like what your wife thought of this, and how it feels to have, it might feel awkward at first. I don't know, but I
sure,
would love to hear, like, if you want to try it out for a little while and get back to me, I
yeah,
would love to hear a follow-up to see how it went.
absolutely.
That'd be
No
amazing.
doubt, and I appreciate your time, right? I mean, I listened to you. I started podcasting a while back because I want to absorb everything. And I
Yeah.
heard you on the Sober Guy podcast, and I thought this was more for women, right? But I love your stories and the coaching, and
Thanks.
they call you the OG, right?
He
You
sure
are,
did.
but
Yeah,
and I love it.
it was actually 8 years in
And you know what?
June.
I was
Yeah.
impressed that you answered my email, right? And offered coaching because I felt like, you're in a place where you're a big shot, right? And
No,
but
that's
but I mean
that's
that's how I
cute.
felt, but you're
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 adorable.
you're but you're approachable, right? And the
Thank you.
fact that you emailed me back and said I'd love to help, and to me that's a gift, and I'm very grateful for that,
Well,
right?
thank you for having the
I
courage to
am.
come on and talk with me about this. I know it's not super easy, but I really think it'll be helpful for other people to sort of hear what it's like to just kind of work things out sometimes. This isn't
Sure.
like a typical coaching call. This is more like processing type of thing. But no, I think it'll be really helpful. Thank you so much for having the
Yeah.
courage to
Thank you, and I'll keep you
be on the
posted.
hot seat. All right, sounds
Well,
good.
I find out my recovery that you have to put yourself out there. Rigorous honesty is the only way you're going to get anything out of this program. That's it,
Yeah, you definitely get out of it what you
right?
put into
And,
it.
and I keep getting out, putting myself out of the comfort zone, and
Good
I
for
and I
you.
could, yeah, and I continue to grow from it.
Yeah,
I'm not afraid to be talk about my feelings and be honest because it helps.
it really
So
does. Yeah, thank
it
you so
does.
much for your
Thank you.
active service today. It was amazing.
All right, and I'll check back with you.
Okay, sounds
All right.
great.
All right. Thank
Thanks.
you. Take care now.
You too. One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting odatchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.